If you rely on a sample of one, the impact extends far beyond just product design, the color of the freaking packaging or the choice of the flavor for that meal. You can actually undermine years of careful brand building. Hey there, I'm Mags, also known as the Marketer Whisperer. If you've ever felt the doubts and pressures of leadership starting to sap your confidence and passion for this amazing job, then this podcast is for you. As a former marketer myself, I've lived through the chaos of consumer brands for over 16 years, so I do get what you're going through. And that's enough to leave any smart and driven marketer feeling like a burnt out version of their former self. But it doesn't have to be this way. So on this show, I'll be sharing pragmatic tips and also real stories to help you feeling confident, creative, and passionate about marketing leadership again. But in today's show, we're going to talk about something super frustrating for marketeers, because we've all been there, right? Presenting a well-researched product or a campaign idea only to be met with dismissive comments like, well, my wife didn't understand the concept, or my kid didn't like the packaging color. Can we change that, please? So these are called sample of one opinions, right? So some from the research place would call them N=1. You know that terminology, right? And that can be incredibly frustrating, especially when they come from senior leaders whose personal biases threaten to derail months and months of very rigorous and painful at times consumer research. The core issue here is the amalgam of anecdotes, anecdotal experiences even, with actual market data, right? A leader's family members, no matter how well-intentioned, simply can't stand in for a brand's target consumer base. They just cannot. And I can't stress enough that point. I've come across this too many times in my marketing career, because these singular perspectives are colored by personal taste, demographics, mindsets that may be completely separated from those of the consumers of the product or the campaign that, they need to appeal to. So, and that's especially more frustrating and harder to tackle for younger, less experienced marketeers who need to push back against this kind of subjective decision making, and that's super difficult to do, especially when the sample of one opinion comes from a senior leader they are expected to defer to. And I've seen that time and time again. Making choices based on isolated personal reactions rather than true and robust insight is a complete disaster for your brand. If you rely on a sample of one, the impact extends far beyond just product design, the color of the freaking packaging or the choice of the flavor for that meal. You can actually undermine years of careful brand building, and you know how much work and tears and sweat goes into that. It can alienate the most loyal consumers, and it really causes a company to sometimes completely miss shifting the consumer needs and cultural currents. And it really sends a clear message that marketing expertise is totally undervalued compared to the personal preferences of individuals who are far removed from the consumer reality. And yes, you may read a lot of research. They may have talked to consumers. When we work for an organization, we are by default biased. There is no way you can fully embody your consumer working for the organization that produces the product or the service you're offering. This is just not true, because you've got access to too much data. You live, you breathe the brand every day. You come across it every day by simply the fact that you've got a job in this organization. It's not by choice of a need. So you are biased, whether you want it or not, you are. Therefore, the sample of one is absolutely ridiculous. Yes. And yet, it happens in every single organization. So I wanted to do a podcast about that, because I wrote a post on LinkedIn actually that got quite a few marketers firing up, because they've gone through that themselves, and it's really, really frustrating. So I wanted to give 5 tips to any of you who is going to come across the N equal 1, the sample of one person in their organizations. So number 1, do lead with data, always. Data is your friend. So when you go to those meetings, you need to talk to the VP, and you start to realize who are the people who are going to be the sample of one type of people, right? You spot them. So come armed with compelling market research data, consumer insights, focus groups feedbacks, performance metrics, anything that will clearly demonstrate why your recommendations are grounded in reality rather than assumptions. You need to showcase how robust your data is based on the size of the sample, and do that professionally. They will get the hint, hopefully. If they don't, there are other tips you can put in place and practice with. But the data will always be your friend because it just speaks the truth based on a limited sample, but it's still a better sample than the one person. Tip number 2, acknowledge personal input, especially if those leaders have a bit of an ego, and you don't want to create tension or personal conflict within this situation. So I know that's going to sting, and it might be very difficult for some of you to do, but do acknowledge the personal input from this person, and then you pivot. Just like Ross said, pivot. A simple something like, thanks for sharing that perspective, can validate the sample of one ego and opinion before you refocus on, the actual consumer feedback. Thank you for sharing that perspective. I would like now to have a look at what we got from research and take that into consideration to make our final decision on the product launch, whatever it is that you're going through. This is a key one because some of them can get really upset. Tip number 3, use examples. If you do have, and I guess in pretty much all organizations, you do have brand failures from the past, right? That's part of life. We try stuff that's just not working. So remind these leaders, if you can, of past brand failures caused by relying too heavily on individuals' personal tastes over research data and research insights and findings. There might be some examples in the history of your brand or of a sister brand in the organization where decisions like that have been made and they've not led to really positive return and outcome. It's really important. All brands have cases of failure stemming from poorly informed decisions. We all do. Just ask your colleagues if you're new in the company or if you're not sure. Do it in a professional way and gather some insights. To be fair, us marketeers also do the same stuff of sample of one. We do like something. It might be our personal taste. We need to always go back to the brand. That really is our job, and our mission is to make sure that everything that we do serves the brand really well. And our opinion needs to be carefully checked every now and again that we're working towards where the brand needs to go, the strategy and its identity. So it's sometimes easy to just favor an NPD over another NPD idea just because we feel more excited about it and because we like it. I had and it's easy to forget the consumer. That's basically what I'm saying. I had an example a couple of years ago when we were trying to find some innovation ideas for the Lindt Christmas brand. So, all the Santas, gold reindeers and so on, and the bears, teddies. And at some point we thought we would create a gold range. So we wanted to dress up Santa instead of his red robe to make it gold because it would just align so well with the rest of our gold foil range for Christmas. So in the ideation session, that's what you do. You come up with loads of stuff, and then the next stage is to narrow it down to what is feasible, what is rooted in consumer insights, what makes sense with the strategy, and so on. You kind of put some filters on that. I was excited about it. I think my boss was also excited about it. It just made the range stand out more on shelf. It made sense with our gold cues, and so on and so forth. I won't go into too much detail because there's probably some stuff that's confidential. But anyway, and then we had a consumer test at the end of the day with the drawings and the illustrations and ideas that we came up during that brainstorming day. And consumers actually didn't like it. And I was shocked. I was like, meh. I really was disappointed. I thought I was actually excited. It wasn't a flavor NPD per se, but it was a packaging evolution that I was excited about for consistency of the look and feel. Again, my biased marketing brain and mind looking after my range. And the consumer feedback was they were confused because to them, the codes of, the red looking robe of Santa means milk chocolate. You get milk chocolate. And in the gold robe, even though they might have associated with some of the Lean product, but not as much as we did, of course, the consumers thought that this product would be a white chocolate. So that did sink in. And we decided not to launch it. I think it was launched in Germany a couple of years later. Anyway, we were like, eh. I mean, you see, it's interesting. It was an idea that really resonated in the head office. The consumers that we've shared this idea with said no, because it would have been, there's less white chocolate consumers and shoppers, and they would have gotten confused with the recipe of the product. So we would have had to communicate it more clearly. So it just defeated the purpose, really. So you see how we in marketing can even get biased, and there's way more example I can give about myself on that. So also be kind with people and their sample of one. You've probably also gone through the same stuff yourself without even realizing. But having said that, it is our job to make sure that decisions that we take are grounded in reality rather than assumptions. The fourth tip would be to suggest focus groups. If the leader insists their opinion matters, they're strongly, in favor of this, propose forming a panel that better represents the actual consumer base, together, feedbacks. Depending on the leader you're talking to, you could just say, whether that's going to be a way to support the decision we might be making, following his opinion or her opinion. Or if it doesn't, then what's the next stage? You need to also show the two paths, the two journeys, whether that's a no-go or a go. What are you going to do after the focus group phase? That comes at a cost, of course. There's different styles of focus groups and different ranges. But again, if your senior leader is really adamant, they want that NPD to not be launched, or they want this one to be launched, whether and you don't have any proof that it's going to work or any metrics, do that. Best, even highlight the fact that this can be used to strengthen selling decks that you're going to have to use when you talk to the retailers, to influence them, to make sure that you've got a listing. They will ask a lot of questions. That's how retailers work, because they want to see robust data as they are considering listing your product or running your campaign in their stores. And that's completely fair. So a senior leader might also react positively, I think, to the fact that you're bringing the retailer stuff, because the worst that's going to happen is that the retailer won't list your NPD, and that's lost sales, lost turnover, and leaders don't want that because it's also their bonus, it's the performance of the organization. So you see, this is back to how to influence people. You also have to understand what's important to them. Where is their ego playing at? What can you challenge and what is a bit tricky to challenge, and therefore what route you need to consider in order to influence them. So the retailer route is also a good one, because it's true. You're going to have to build a really good, robust selling deck to justify and support the launch of your NPD. And if you have no data, no research, how are you going to influence them? Tip number 5, if everything else fails, escalate. Respectfully, of course. In some cases, you need to tactfully loop in some other decision makers who may appreciate research over individual opinions and biases. you probably know them in the organization. You can spot the ones who have a strong opinion, needs to be heard, and needs to be, their opinion is the universal one. And you can also spot the people who rely on data. In the corporate world, use your circles of influence because that's part of your marketing strategy. You can't just drive a brand by working on your slides and your Excel spreadsheets. You work with cross-functional teams. You work with commercial leaders, supply chain, finance managers, a lot of business partners that you retailers and consumers and agencies you have to influence. So you can't fight and win wars on your own. You have to use the ammunitions you've got around you. And some people might be very good to help you influence some other targets in the company. Ultimately, the sample of one mindset always represents a failure from leadership, undermining the consumer-centric role and the expertise that we have in marketing. And it doesn't have to be a culture failure because sometimes it's just one individual in the company. But if it is the case, then you're lucky enough because there might be other leaders, influential leaders around that person or around you that can help you strengthen that point of view of being rooted in reality and data. Never forget, we in marketing are the guardians of the consumer reality. We study meticulously and understand their behaviors, their preferences, how they think, where they live, who they are, what are their purchase drivers through in-depth researches. And we don't really make choices based on personal preferences alone. I mean, sometimes we do, but we realize that when it's too late. Or else consumers, just like the example that I gave, just give us a stick and show us that we're not right. So defund that skill from personal bias and anecdotes because it's essential to ensure that your brand has a long-term health and follows the strategy. Right, my rant is over today. I think you probably have heard me sound quite smiley because it makes me laugh. But when I think of all the examples I've got in my head, down to my own experience and the comments and reactions I've had on LinkedIn, it was amazing to see this is quite common across industries, pretty common, in fact. That was a word that was used, a classic example. And that actually made me mad to read the word classic because it's not an isolated case. You're not alone. If you think you can't deal with a sample of one, it's a thing. Unfortunately, it is a classic example, and I'm hoping that together we can work on making it a minute exception that will disappear at some point because people will understand marketing and how the consumer needs to be in the center of everything. Right, that's it. I'm done, and I hope it's been useful. As always, send me your comments or questions if you want me to cover some other challenges that you've got in your day-to-day. And, have a good day and speak soon. Thank you for joining me on another insightful episode of The Marketing Whisperer. If you found value in this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could leave a rating and a review on the podcast app of your choice. It really would help me reach more marketing leaders like you who could benefit from these insights in return. And I'd love if you would join upon my community of marketing leaders. All details are available on my website, startingblockscoaching.com. And lastly, if you're seeking one-to-one coaching, group workshops maybe for your team, leadership training, marketing expertise or career advice, basically everything that makes you a better marketing leader, feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Search for Magali Leroux. I don't know how else to pronounce it to make it easier. Speak soon.